Larger-than-life political myths, that is the topic of tonight's byline. Myths are important in politics. A lot of what we think, more importantly, what we feel about politics, comes from mythologies that parties or movements build up over the years. For years in Canada, one of the most persistent myths was that we were a nation of peacekeepers, not warriors, and it was especially a myth pushed by Liberals. The fact that Canada was a major force in the Second World War and the Korean War under Liberal prime ministers, that didn't matter at all. The myth persisted. Facts could not dislodge it. Today, we're dealing with another myth that will not die. That is income inequality. I told you before Parliament resumed at the end of January that this would be the big issue of the session. Even if it doesn't dominate question period, it is an idea, a myth really, that's being pushed by opposition parties and the media. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau brought the issue up at the party's convention over the weekend.
We have a real problem. The middle class is in trouble. People haven't had a real raise in 30 years, while inequality has increased and household debt has exploded. Those who practice the politics of division see this as an opportunity to exploit.
Oh, but he's not exploiting anything, is he? And really, the middle class is in trouble? I'm not so sure about that. He also claims people can't get a good job. Well, if you want a good job, go west, young man, go west. I've been saying that for years, and friends of mine are actually doing it come July. They're fed up with Ontario. They're heading to Alberta, where the unemployment rate is 4.6%. Of course, they could stop in Saskatchewan, where unemployment is 4.3%. But those are just job numbers. What about incomes, you say? The middle class they're in decline, don't you know? Well, they are, as long as you ignore the facts. On Tuesday, Stats Canada put out their latest numbers on financial security. What does it show? Well, really the opposite of what Trudeau claims. According to Stats Canada, the median net worth of Canadian family units was $243,800 in 2012, up 44.5% from 2005 and almost 80% from the 1999 median of $137,000. That's adjusted for inflation, folks. Well, if that's not in decline, well, what's going on here? How can this be? Surely this must be happening. You're going to be saying there's got to be happening because the rich have all the money and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and that's just pushing up the median net worth. No, sorry. Again, facts don't back that up. In 1999, the lowest 20% of the population had minus 0.1% of the country's net worth. These are young people starting out, folks that are poor. Well, in 2012, they have the exact same amount of the country's net worth, minus 0.1%. These people, if you added up all their money, all their worldly possessions, would have just over $1,000. Not much has changed for them. The second quintile had 2.6% in 1999, and by 2012, they had dropped to 2.2%. But their net worth in 1999 was $39,600 in inflation-adjusted terms, and in 2012, it was $56,100. So that group has a smaller share of the total net worth, but their net worth is rising substantially. Now, the third quintile, this is the heart of the middle class, and surely these folks are in decline. After all, Justin Trudeau and his media chorus have said so. Again, no. In 1999, the third quintile had 8.8% of the net worth and a median net worth of $137,000. 2012, they've got 9%, and their median net worth is $245,000. The fourth quintile moved up over that same period, and the fifth quintile actually dropped in terms of their share of the national net worth. The biggest gains by every measure were by the middle class. I've told you before that in Canada, the rich are getting richer, and so is pretty much everyone else. That's what the facts say. The facts debunk Trudeau. But that doesn't matter. Reporter after reporter will simply repeat the mantra of income inequality without bothering to check the facts. Why? I don't know. Could be laziness. Could be that they just love Trudeau and progressive politics that much that they feel the claim is right. And that's the problem, not only with lazy journalists who go on their feelings, but with voters as well. Voters buy into myths. Voters cast ballots based on intangibles. Trudeau might be wrong on the facts, but that doesn't mean he won't win as long as the reporters and your friends, your neighbors, your family, well, if they all believe the hype. It's up to you to help spread the word and topple the myth. And that's the byline.
In the entire weekend, what I talked about was how important it was to understand that the middle class in this country is under a tremendous amount of tension, and I did make a solid commitment to not raise taxes for the middle class.
Taxes on the higher income Canadians?
Listen, there's an awful lot of discussions to be made, and I certainly will not be raising them on Canadians who are suffering under an overly heavy tax burden as it is.
I'm glad that Justin Trudeau admits it's an overly heavy tax burden. Warren Kinsella joins me now to talk more about this. And Warren, you've been in politics a long time. Sometimes myths matter much more than facts, don't they?
Well, myths and symbols matter the most. I mean, the one point he makes, and whether it's a myth or not, and StatsCan suggests part of it is if you ask most Canadians, the vast majority of them say, no, I don't feel like I'm doing better off. I still feel like I'm struggling. My problem with the StatsCan data, and I think you gave a very good summary of it all, is yes, that upper end of the so-called middle class, that is people earning from $30,000 up to $100,000 a year, that upper end are doing better. But the problem is, and StatsCan doesn't get into this, but people like Jim Flaherty do, it's all built on a house of sand, right? It's overinflated house values and pensions, right? And pension funds that are at risk, as we've seen in the United States. So my concern is that, yeah, we seem to be at that upper end of the scale, seem to be doing better, but it's in respect of housing and pensions that aren't doing particularly well at all.
Which goes to the point of saying you're playing on feelings because people feel that they're not doing as well. Why? Well, because they're spending more than they should be on their own homes.
Yeah,
and you can't really do much on that. I mean, I said this a couple of weeks ago. Between 1976 and 2011, the middle 60% of Canadians saw a 23.2% inflation-adjusted pay raise. So their incomes have gone up as well. Their net worth has gone up, but
their debt,
they're mortgaging too much.
And I sound like I'm praising Flaherty again. I need the smelling salts here. He's right about another thing. You know, along with the vulnerability we've got on this overheated housing market and on pensions that are unstable, we've got another problem, which is, and Trudeau has pointed this out in his 8-minute video, is that our per capita debt per household is far greater than it is in a lot of the Western world. So we have three big vulnerabilities there, and I think that's why I think some people would have some merit, some proof in saying, you know, I really don't feel like it's secure. Maybe StatsCan says I am, but I don't feel that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure government programs are the way to go on something like this, though, which is what my fear is with Trudeau. And he laid out his plan at the convention, and the party did, and there's a lot of national programs, national housing strategy, national transit strategy, but then he says he won't raise taxes, which strains credibility because you have all these national programs, you've got to pay for them somehow.
Well, if he pursues them, you know, resolutions from conventions, biennial conventions are a dime a dozen. We'll see what happens. But he's right. And, you know, Flaherty is right in the last budget. The federal government, as you and I have talked about before, is heading into a structural surplus. Actually, there's some economists who say they're in a structural surplus right now, so they actually don't have to increase revenue through taxation, right? And so both Trudeau and Flaherty are saying substantially the same thing. The problem is, at the provincial and municipal levels, those are levels of government that are now effectively bankrupt, and they're desperately looking for ways to find revenue. You've got all the big city mayors meeting in your hometown today, and basically their entire platform is to extend their hands to the federal government and say, you know, pass us some cash.
Has always been thus. Regardless of who's in power, that's what big city mayors and premiers come to Ottawa for. Give us some cash. Less than a minute left. All the polling still showing Trudeau's going to be in the lead, making my prediction that he'll be prime minister in 2015, closer and closer by the day. If you're advising somebody on how to beat him, whether it's dippers or conservatives, how do you advise them on how to beat a myth?
Well, one of the things that you do is you shine a light on some of his verbal missteps. And, you know, I wrote a column about this in some of the Sun papers on Sunday. You know, Justin's strength is his weakness. You know, he's refreshing and candid and he takes risks. But sometimes, as we saw in this recent Ukrainian episode, he's taking risks too often. Those things start to add up and they become a pattern. And if I were advising those against him, that's what I would be looking at is maybe he's not ready for the big chair yet.
Yeah, well, that's where I sit, but Canadians, according to polling, say they see him as
They love him.
the best PM right now. We'll
They
see
love
where
him.
things go. Warren, good talking to you. We'll chat soon.
Take care, Brian.